In the quiet expanse of space, something is unfolding that gently tests the limits of our understanding. We call it 3 Iapetus, but giving it a name has not brought us any closer to comprehending it. The more we observe, the deeper the mystery becomes, and the harder it is to interpret. Its behavior is far too orderly to be dismissed as a mere chunk of ice and rock that strayed from interstellar space. Its brightness fluctuates minimally, its apparent shape remains stable, and its position against the backdrop of distant stars is remarkably steady. What's crucial here is to strictly separate what we are actually seeing from what remains a hypothesis. The facts are these. Multiple telescopes, both on the ground and in space, have consistently and repeatedly detected it. The hypothesis is simply that its light and movement are difficult to explain with standard cometary models. The story doesn't begin the moment we give something a name. True understanding begins when the contradictions start piling up. 3 Iapetus has a strange appearance, a unique way of moving, and an unusual composition. But just listing its oddities doesn't make it science. So let's organize this into 3 possibilities. First, it could be of natural origin, but from a parent star system where chemical evolution is vastly different from our own. Second, it could be natural, but with a peculiar shape or surface fissures that create an effect resembling propulsion. Third, and this is a very low probability, it could involve artificial factors. The important thing is that each of these possibilities can be tested. We can scrutinize the color of its light through spectroscopy, its motion by calculating infinitesimal velocity changes, and its composition by observing how its chemical makeup changes over time. Looking back through old observation records, it's possible it passed through the outer solar system long before we started paying attention. If so, perhaps it wasn't us who have been watching 3 Iapetus for a long time, but the other way around. But here too, we must restrain our interpretations. What we need is a methodical process of proposing falsifiable predictions for each hypothesis and then testing them with solid observation. Recently, some of the clearest images have come not from giant observatories, but from a site in the Namib Desert in southern Africa, one of the darkest places on Earth, almost entirely free of light pollution. The observers there set up their equipment in sync with the lunar eclipse. In that brief window, when the Earth's shadow blocks the moonlight, the background brightness of the sky drops dramatically. The sky becomes a deep, profound black, revealing even the faintest threads of stardust. And there it was, 3 Iapetus shining against the black canvas like the flash of a kingfisher's wing. But the question naturally remains, could the color be an optical illusion? They took precautions. They alternated between long and short exposures and used flat field and dark frame corrections to eliminate any sensor bias. Another team, using different filters, captured images simultaneously to check for any wavelength-dependent distortions. Yet, what remained was the glow of a real object with a distinct greenish hue. This is difficult to explain by reflected light alone. If gas emissions are involved, the next step is spectroscopy. We need to find out what wavelength the green line appears at and how its intensity changes over time. The answer will quietly sort out whether this is a natural chemical trick or evidence for another hypothesis. They could have pointed their telescopes anywhere, but they chose 3 Iapetus, and what their cameras captured was beyond their imagination. There, against the jet black canvas of space, floated a light like an emerald flame. Its glow wasn't just a reflection. It seemed to be radiating from within. A spectroscopy team from the University of Tokyo reported that this emission isn't at a single wavelength, but has a periodicity vibrating over time. A celestial scientist from Harvard University stated that no substance known in the natural world exhibits such a stable green luminescence. Researchers at NASA, analyzing its light curve, have noted that the emissions are not in sync with the solar wind. If this were just a clump of ice and dust, its brightness should fluctuate in response to the radiation pressure from the sunday. But 3 Iapetus maintains a constant trajectory. A physicist from Germany's Max Planck Institute commented that this very stability could be the key to distinguishing whether it is artificial or natural. Scientists agree that this is a visitor from outside our solar system, but its nature doesn't fit into any existing category. Normally, a comet releases gas and dust as it's heated by the sun, forming a glowing coma around its nucleus. It then develops a long, beautiful tail that can stretch for millions of kilometers, and a green glow isn't unusual either. It's a well-known astronomical phenomenon caused by diatomic carbon molecules being excited by ultraviolet radiation. But the spectrum of 3 Iapetus turned this common knowledge on its head. Spectroscopic data from large telescopes around the world, Subaru in Japan, Gemini in Hawaii, the VLT at the European Southern Observatory, and the James Webb Space Telescope in orbit showed no trace of the carbon signature that should produce the green color. And yet, the object is radiating a vivid green light. A researcher from the French National Center for Scientific Research pointed out that this cannot be explained by any known chemical reaction, suggesting the possibility of an unknown molecule or a fluorescent reaction involving a shift in quantum states. A team of astrophysicists in Russia is working on reconstructing numerical models postulating that this could be a form of quantum dot emission. Typically, when sunlight strikes a C2 molecule made of 2 carbon atoms, its electrons are excited by ultraviolet rays and emit fluorescent light in the green wavelength. That's the source of a normal comet's green glow. But in 3 Iapetus, that C2 is missing. The fact that it still shines so brightly cannot be dismissed as a simple scientific anomaly. A joint team from Cambridge University and the Indian Space Research Organization has proposed the theory that interaction with the solar wind is causing a localized increase in electron density, triggering a kind of plasma resonance. Meanwhile, a space scientist at Harvard has put forward the photonic structure theory, suggesting that a fine lattice of metallic crystals inside Iapetus is re-radiating light at a specific wavelength. NASA's latest observations have shown that the emission intensity is oscillating with a periodic pulse, which looks more like a controlled pattern than a natural phenomenon. Professor Hitoshi Murayama of the University of Tokyo commented that this phenomenon could be a new discovery that transcends the boundaries between astrophysics and quantum engineering. The green glow floating in the darkness of space felt less like light emitted by matter and more like a signal, quietly pulsing, left behind by some intelligence. The most baffling part of the analysis of 3 Iapetus was the complete absence of carbon. The C2 molecule, diatomic carbon, which should have been dyeing the comet green, was nowhere to be found. And yet, Iapetus continued to emit a deep, cold green light. This was a scientifically inexplicable contradiction, like a challenge to our theories written across the night sky. Japanese astronomers, analyzing the fluctuations in its spectrum, confirmed a short-term flickering pattern not seen in ordinary comets. Focusing on this, a physicist at Harvard University suggested the possibility of an unknown radioactive isotope or a quasi-stable metallic element emitting light under ultraviolet radiation. Meanwhile, a team from the Max Planck Institute in Germany proposed a self-excitation hypothesis based on quantum interference. NASA's latest observation satellite has recorded a concentration of carbon dioxide in the coma of Iapetus that is over 100 times the normal amount. Modern science does not yet have an answer for how this ratio, which is unstable in terrestrial chemical reactions, is maintained in the vacuum of space. In a normal comet, water vapor is dominant and CO2 is only present in trace amounts. But with 3 Iapetus, that ratio is completely reversed. Carbon dioxide overwhelms the water vapor, turning our understanding of its chemical balance on its head. Furthermore, it was confirmed that the coma contains an unusually high amount of metallic elements, especially nickel. An analysis by Japan's KEK research organization showed that the intensity of the nickel emission line was 3 times the theoretical value. A Russian space scientist sees this as a possibility that minerals formed outside the solar system may have different isotopes. On the other hand, a team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences proposed the possibility of high-energy decay occurring inside, reporting that if self-heating is happening as it cools, the simultaneous release of CO2 and metal vapor could be explained theoretically. However, Iapetus is far from the sun, and it would be difficult to maintain such a high temperature. This contradiction is what further confuses the observers. 3 Iapetus began to emit nickel when it was still between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. At that distance, it is impossible for metal to vaporize naturally, yet a clear trace of metallic vapor was observed. According to an analysis by the German Aerospace Center, the velocity of the ejected particles was constant, almost like a controlled propulsion. In response, a Harvard researcher analyzed that if this were a propellant, the composition would be close to a mixed fuel of CO2 and nickel oxide. NASA engineers have not completely ruled out the possibility that this is the residue of an engine-driven craft. Professor Hitoshi Murayama of the University of Tokyo stated that if it is an artificial object, it would be the first interstellar object with intelligent design ever observed. However, scientists remain cautious. Even if the ratios of nickel and CO2 are abnormal, there is still a possibility that they can be explained by unknown physics, such as magnetic reconnection or plasma resonance. But even if all these theories are combined, one question remains: why does this object alone continue to shine so coldly, so precisely, and as if with a purpose? Rocket engines leave traces of carbon dioxide and metals in space after combustion. These are precisely the components seen in the observation data of 3 Iapetus. Of course, this is not direct proof, but it's hard to ignore the coincidence. Putting scientific explanations aside, its movement has an almost eerie regularity. Since its discovery, Iapetus has maintained a surprisingly stable orbit, as if it were correcting for minute external forces on its own. A control engineering team at the University of Tokyo analyzed this lack of orbital disturbance and found it to be similar to the characteristics of an autonomous control system. NASA astrophysicists have pointed out that for stable flight, without propulsion to be possible, energy distribution must be controlled internally. Russia's Space Dynamics Research Institute stated that if Iapetus is an artificial object, we should be looking for traces of attitude control rather than propulsion. There is no scientific proof yet, but this very stillness has become one of the greatest mysteries the universe has shown us. Normally, the ice on a comet's surface sublimates due to solar heat, and the ejected gas causes the nucleus to wobble, making its path slightly erratic. This phenomenon is called non-gravitational acceleration. For example, Oumuamua, the first interstellar object discovered in 2017, deviated from its trajectory by more than 1,000 kilometers a day. The second interstellar object, Borisov, deviated by about 100 kilometers. And even the largest comet in the solar system's history, Hale-Bopp, recorded fluctuations of over 10 kilometers a day. But the deviation of 3 Iapetus was less than 2 kilometers. Even when compared to the Keplerian orbital model, the error is smaller than the margin of observational error. A research team from the European Space Agency, ESA, evaluated it as a solid celestial body with some form of inertial control rather than a comet. A theoretical physicist at Harvard University stated that this stability cannot be explained by gravity alone, and that some kind of attitude maintenance mechanism must be at work inside. Despite clear evidence of gas emission, 3 Iapetus does not change its orbit one bit. Its speed and direction have remained almost completely constant for months. It is as if it is consciously maintaining its own course. The simplest explanation is that its mass is so enormous that it is not easily affected by radiation pressure or gas jets. According to estimates, its diameter is several kilometers and its mass exceeds 3 billion tons. However, even comets with a similar mass, like Hale-Bopp, show definite orbital deviations. Weight alone cannot explain it. The German Aerospace Center conducted a numerical simulation assuming that Iapetus's attitude control is due to electromagnetic forces. The results showed a surprising match. If there is a conductive core structure inside that can control its interaction with the solar magnetic field, this stability can be theoretically reproduced. Professor Hitoshi Murayama of the University of Tokyo commented, "This phenomenon is not a mere coincidence. It has shown for the first time in a realistic way the possibility of the existence of an artificial structure in the universe." The mass of 3 Iapetus is estimated to be over 3 billion tons. Surely, an object of this weight should be largely unaffected by solar wind or gas jets. But a close examination of the observational data shows that this simple explanation doesn't add up. There have been many cases in the past of comets with similar or greater mass showing orbital changes of several kilometers due to the Sunday. But Iapetus alone does not move. It is as if its very immobility is an intentional design. An astrophysicist at Harvard University stated that some kind of control, not inertia, is at work, and a researcher at the University of Tokyo also pointed out that its behavior is very similar to that of an artificial structure maintaining its attitude in a microgravity environment. NASA's latest data analysis also shows that its velocity change is less than 0.01% in a month. This is an abnormal degree of stability for a natural object drifting in space. This unnatural stillness eventually led astronomers to an old mystery. That is the wow signal, the most mysterious radio signal in the history of astronomy. In August 1977, the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Ohio, USA, received a narrow-band radio burst that lasted for 72 seconds. The frequency was 1,420 megahertz. This is the hydrogen line, the most universal frequency in the entire cosmos, emitted by hydrogen atoms. The signal was clear, strong, and came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It had a structured pattern that could not be explained by noise. Researchers at Harvard and Cambridge universities have pointed out that if another intelligent civilization were to say, "We are here," they would use the hydrogen line, which can be considered the common language of the universe. An analysis by the University of Tokyo's Institute of Space and Astronautical Science also suggested that the rise and fall of the signal were similar to an artificial communication waveform. At the time, this observation shook the world, but no follow-up observations were made, and even after half a century, its origin remains unknown. The astonishment of the astronomer who wrote "wow" on the observation record at that time became the name of this signal. Since then, the wow signal has been passed down as one of the greatest mysteries in space science. A similar signal has never been detected again. But the appearance of 3 Iapetus changed everything. A team from the International Astronomical Union, by extrapolating its orbit back in time, found that the path of Iapetus's passage was surprisingly close to the direction from which the wow signal arrived, the constellation Sagittarius. A simulation by the German Aerospace Center also suggests that at that time, Iapetus was passing through the outer edge of the solar system and was in a position to send a radio signal toward Earth. A theory group at the Indian Space Research Organization pointed out that if that signal was not a natural phenomenon, the possibility that Iapetus itself was the source cannot be ruled out. Two long isolated mysteries were now connected by a single line. When the orbit of 3 Iapetus is calculated backward, its starting point overlaps with the same direction in Sagittarius as the WOW signal observed in 1977. It is estimated that at that time, Iapetus was passing by the edge of the solar system, even beyond Pluto. It was still too far to be observed from Earth, but what if a short radio signal had been emitted at that time? A radio astronomer at NASA says that the coincidence of the direction and timing is statistically unlikely to be a coincidence. A research team at the University of Tokyo compared the orbital inclination with the arrival angle of the WOW signal and confirmed that they matched within an error of 0.5 degrees. An astrophysicist at Harvard University stated that this coincidence has a meaning beyond mere chance, and the possibility that an interstellar probe emitted a beacon to announce its approach cannot be ruled out theoretically. Of course, it is too early to determine whether this is true, but the fact that the green eye of the universe and the wireless voice echoed from the same direction across space and time is a coincidence that cannot be ignored. Many scientists are cautiously viewing this as a mere coincidence, but some say that there are too many connecting points for it to be a coincidence. If the WOW signal was not just noise, but an announcement of the arrival of something entering the solar system, then the possibility emerges that that something is 3 Iapetus. According to an analysis by the German Aerospace Center, when the signal strength was compared with the expected distance of Iapetus, the output matched surprisingly well with the case where the source was located outside the solar system. The astronomical team of the Russian Academy of Sciences is conducting a simulation assuming that a single interstellar object sent a directional communication just once. The result was that the signal's decay curve and the distance decay model matched. A French astronomer commented that the data is too consistent to be dismissed as a coincidence. The scientific community remains cautious, but at the very least, this coincidence has opened the door to a new line of inquiry. The view that 3 Iapetus is a comet with strange properties is also strong. A joint study by NASA and the European Space Agency, ESA, has pointed out that its chemical composition may be very different from that of Earth-type star systems. In other words, Iapetus may be a fragment of ice born in a different stellar system. Its stable orbit is also thought to be the result of its mass, inertia, or an unknown sublimation mechanism. Professor Hitoshi Murayama of the University of Tokyo said that there is a possibility that it is glowing due to unknown molecules or plasma resonance, and that substances that humanity has not yet classified may be involved. The Indian Space Research Organization is treating the green light of Iapetus as a new type of quantum fluorescence from a hydrocarbon molecule and is trying to reproduce it in the laboratory. The results have not yet reached a perfect match, but a similar wavelength has been confirmed. Science does not fear the unknown. It finds the key to progress in anomalies. 3 Iapetus is the very symbol of that anomaly and is becoming an existence that forces us to rethink the workings of the universe. We are now watching, in real time, an interstellar object that continues to defy our theoretical frameworks. 3 Iapetus, shrouded in a veil of green light, continues its journey as a mystery, silently but surely grazing Earth's orbit. Its appearance is that of a chunk of ice and rock, but the more we observe it, the more we feel that it is something more than just matter. An astrophysicist at NASA has stated that this object does not belong to any known category, and a researcher at the University of Tokyo has also said that Iapetus may represent an intermediate existence between natural and artificial objects. The Quantum Astronomy Lab at Harvard University, after analyzing the behavior of photons, discovered that the light around Iapetus draws patterns as if it were carrying information. A team from the Russian Academy of Sciences, analyzing the periodic fluctuations of the emission wavelength as a signal wave, has found a regularity different from known natural emissions. The green light shining in the silence of space is blurring the line between science and imagination, strongly urging us to expand our view of the universe. Iapetus is quietly posing a question as a light that the universe has not yet been able to answer. No one can say for sure whether it was observing humanity, but what is certain is the fact that we are now observing its existence. Observation networks in Japan, the United States, Europe, China, and India are collaborating to constantly monitor the full spectrum of Iapetus. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope is recording minute changes in its emission on a minute-by-minute basis, and the control engineering team at the University of Tokyo has discovered a periodic rhythm by analyzing its fluctuations. A researcher at the Max Planck Institute in Germany has stated that there is a purpose to the movement of Iapetus, as if it were passing by to show us something. Now that humanity has taken the position of the observer, we may have become, for the first time, not just beings who look at the universe one way, but beings who are looked back at. Whatever the truth may be, it is definitely heading this way. Blurring the boundary between science and myth, Iapetus continues to ask humanity about the true depths of the universe.